A very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're watching us from. Thank you for joining us on today's talk show. I am Promise Graf, and I'll be your host as we discuss a very sensitive issue that's actually very common all over the world, even though so many people don't know how to deal with it. In the studios, I'm joined with two lovely people, Mrs. Winnie Ojang, the founder of Her Voice, which is a platform for ladies to come together and talk about their stories. And on the other hand, Mr. Peter Aberhart,
Thank you.
the founding director of THAC. THAC is Trauma Healing and Creative Arts Coalition. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking domestic violence. But before we start, I would like to give you guys a minute to take us a bit deep into what you exactly do. I'll start with Winnie. What do you do at Her Voice, sorry?
Thank you very much, Promise, for the invite. I'm very happy to be here today. My name is Winnie Ojanga. I originally come from Kenya. I am a wife, a mother, a fashion designer, and I'm also the founder of Her Voice, which is a platform that is giving women and men who support women issues a platform to share their stories.
Okay, thank you so much, Winnie. That's interesting. Peter, take us into THAC.
Well, my background is I came from humanitarian, so I was working on war-torn countries and on programming in war-torn situations. And then I moved into peace building, peace promotion, mediation, conflict management, and from there into political advising. And then I realized that there is a need to cover root causes of such situations I'm working in, which are normally related to traumatic experiences. So I started to engage on understanding trauma. So I made a hypnotherapist training, and I founded THAC in order to deepen the topic and find solutions on how to address it in a more collaborative way, because I think it's the impact of trauma is deeply underestimated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. So before we go any further, for those of you who would like to find more information about domestic violence, you can visit www.opahealthy-vice.ch. And after that, I would like us to jump straight to the big question. Everybody has it their own way. People are imagining. Some just think maybe it doesn't exist because they've never experienced it before. So I would like you to give us a general picture of what is domestic violence according to what you know. Winnie, if you don't mind starting.
Yeah, sure, I'll start. I think personally domestic violence is actually aggression in any household that affects people who live in the household. It could be aggression between husband and wife. It could be aggression between parents to children, or siblings, sisters to brothers. So domestic violence is not just about women and men, but it's when the abuse starts in any household.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Peter, can you add on to that?
Yes, I think it's right. It also includes for me relationships in general, intimate relationships beyond the household, because they can also, it's just partners that don't necessarily be in the same place, but have a relation of abuse, right? And I think what is important is to understand violence is we don't talk about physical violence only. There's also psychological violence, there's sexual violence, there is also emotional violence just to dominate, and there is these controlling behaviors, right? If you want to be more so, if physical violence can be slapping, hitting, kicking, right? Sexual violence is of course forced intercourse, which is part of domestic violence. And then we have in the emotion, you have a constant humiliation, intimidation, destroying things, threats of harms, threats of take away children, threats of take away goods, right? It's everything affecting the integrity of a person. And then we have controlling behaviors, including isolating a person, locking her in or him in, not giving them space to develop, towards education, controlling money, everything. So every structural influence on persons. So the topic is much wider than normally abuse. So of course, if it's much wider, it also includes more issues, more topics, more themes which we're going to address, I guess, today.
I have a small question about that, about the controlling. If I am married and we have a bank account where we save money, both of us, and if my husband is allowed to, oh, we are both allowed to take money from there, but in my case, I can't take money from there. I have to ask him, is this considered also controlling from my partner? Like I have to ask from him that I need to take money from there whereas he takes it as he wants.
You mean asking for permission?
Yeah. Is this considered controlling, and could it be falling also in the category of domestic violence?
It's a form of it's a form of control, right? Whether it's violence, I think that the domestic violence originates from the whole concept behind is originating from the universal human rights, the integrity of a person. So if you feel controlled by this or dominated, right? So it's also an interaction.
Okay.
If it's an agreement, please say, because we don't have enough and we have to check. It's different than if he wants to control what you're doing with it and where it's going or whatever. So it's a slight an agreement. In this case, it's to consider, right?
Okay, thank you so much. We will go a bit differently. We would like to release some videos that we had on the street with some random people, and we would like to see their views on domestic violence. And please watch this.
I think the only thing you can do is go away. Take your time. It's your life. It's only you who can change something. So if you have violence, maybe there is fear, maybe you're scared to go from this person, but I think the only thing you really can do if you have a violence partner, you just have to go away, because this partner is not the right one.
I think like they have conjugal violence, more conjugal violence in Switzerland in this diaspora. Okay, we see it. Or sometimes we see some parent who beat their children, but beating is not a way to educate the children. Okay, you can correct your kid without beating him. You can make your wife reasonable without harassing her. All right. So to fight it, we have to spread love. Okay, and try to not be depressed. And if you have problem and believe in God, see me say, as what me say, Safa Diallo says, Oramba Back Star Boss Zaga.
In Switzerland, all forms of violence are against the law, also inside the family. It is forbidden for parents to batter their children. No one is allowed to take control over his or her partner or to force someone to have sex. The Federal Office for Gender Equality coordinates the fight against domestic violence and violence against women in Switzerland. During the corona pandemic, many people had to stay at home. Sometimes tensions at home can lead to aggression and violence. That's why we created a poster to let people know where they can find help. On our posters in 13 different languages, you can see where you can get free and confidential help. There is a victim support service in every canton. If you are in danger, call the police at 117. To stop violence against you and your family, the Victim Support Service and the police can organize a shelter and advise you. Don't hesitate to get help if you or someone around you is in need. Together, we can do something against violence.
So I'll go straight to my next question to both of you. What are the most common causes of domestic violence in your knowledge, or according to your professions? What would you say are the common causes of domestic violence?
I'll take it from that based on the women that I work with on my platform, the Her Voice platform. Most of the causes are when women are not educated in terms of knowing how to spot when abuse starts, then it can continue. And also whenever there's financial strain, that a woman is not financially independent, that also causes domestic violence, because then they are voiceless, then they don't know what to do, then they don't know how to go about certain situations.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think we just, while the video was, we discussed this issue about this controlling behavior, and the point you mentioned, I think if we consider it as a gender-based violence, it is violent, right? If you control access of one partner, as the way you mentioned, if it's not reciprocal, right? If you say each other, right, you have to tell me before you take something, it's different. But if it's oriented towards one partner, it's gender-based violence. Just to add on that, so sources of violence, right?
Yeah, causes of violence.
Causes. Well, causes. If you go, of course, aggression, as you mentioned. Now, aggression can also be a response on something, right, which comes from outside the family, which come from outside the house. So it can be all forms of not helplessness, but that can be being dominated elsewhere, right? So you can also have trauma as a source of aggression from things happens elsewhere, comes into the family, and so. As we mentioned, control, there's a lot of things that can cause, and I think it's also what is very important is there is a lot of cultural differences is in people understanding whether this is already violent or not. And I think that is a bit the point, right, that the way we address it here and the way it is addressed also, for example, in the Istanbul Convention, which is a European-based international agreement, then there's a lot of things going into violence. And I like to show you, maybe I have a slides, maybe I can show that, right? Please, I'll
also
check for it.
Yes, you would like to add on.
I think in a case where somebody ends up with the wrong partner, that also can cause abuse in any relationship, and unhappiness generally. Maybe you had certain expectations, and it's not adding up to the deal that you signed for. I think that can also cause.
Okay, thank you very much. You would like to show us something?
Yeah, I said I'd like to show this because we're in periods of pandemics, right? And I'd like to show this graph because it highlights the importance of violence against women, often in domestic settings, right? And you see it is every third woman. In this graph, so there is country where it goes up to 70%, goes maybe down to 10%, but in average, every third woman in the world experiences either physical or sexual violence by a partner or sexual violence by a non-partner. So the scale on the dimension of the issue is going far beyond something that should be hidden at home, right? And I think the domestic is maybe what for me is also restrictions, because you have to simply to open it and make it visible, right? And independent of causes, right? Because causes can vary, but the result is a bit is this, right?
Okay, you mean as in dependency? If someone is depending on the other, it's something that can cause domestic violence. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, what I want to say is that the space we're talking about, right? Domestic. So the setting, the family or the household or this setting is of course a very specific setting.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And a lot of things can happen there.
Okay, thank you very much. You just mentioned that women in most cases are experiencing more domestic violence, and this is where I came with my next question, which is apart from women or even plus women, are there other groups of people that are at a higher risk of experiencing domestic violence?
Yeah, of course there are also other groups that are also at risk of experiencing domestic violence, that teenagers, for example, elderly people, for example, we also have girls generally who are also at a very high risk of experiencing such kind of abuse and violence.
Okay, thank you very much. You have anything to add on, Peter, or should we go?
No, please.
Okay. My other question is about parenting, as you said, teenagers and young girls and children. How would you advise a parent to walk their child through domestic violence? How would you advise a parent to give comfort to their parents? Or is there a specific way that they're supposed to take this issue? Let's say I have a violent partner and my child is involved in this situation. Is there a therapy a parent can give their child?
First of all, I would ask this parent or whoever is going through such kind of abuse to go for counseling. Counseling is very important, and then get the professional help from there. Then from there, then they can also go to different organizations that are supporting such kind of cases.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter, can you add on that?
Yes, I think, well, the first thing is protection, right? The first thing is to break the pattern. Now, this, of course, that needs specific responses. There are shelter programs, you take the victim out, you take the offender out of the settings, right? But I think the first thing is any household violence is a traumatic situation for the children, for the woman, for the man, for all, right? Because it is just changing the basic understanding of protective space. It's not a safe place. It's not a safe environment anymore. And this is traumatic for everybody, also for those who are doing it, who are causing it. So the key thing is then, of course, first create a secure environment. Then the healthcare aspects, right? If you have been offended, violated, whatever, abused, you need health care. Then there is all the law aspects, right? It's a human rights abuse, as we mentioned it, so it's an offense, so it needs a follow-up, it needs a security that there is taken care of. It can be through counseling, it can be through legal things, or is a bit more difficult, right? But we will come later to that. But so there's a couple of responses required. Okay. And I think it helps understanding violence not as a perpetrator-victim issue, but as a trauma story for everybody, involving everybody. And then overcome that, and counseling can be around, right? But having counseling for a woman which has been offended without including the man, she might return, it happens again, so it becomes a chronic situation. Okay. So you have to address the entire domestic settings, and I think protection is the first step. And then empowerment of everybody in the family to getting out of it, and that can take, of course, longer or not longer. But children specifically, of course, there's a lot of impact. First causes and then secondary symptoms, right? If you have a traumatic experience, and that can even have a physical or mental, physical, whatever implications. And for children, it even affects their development, their capacity to learn, their capacity to behave, right? Their bonding is a bonding experience which is extreme traumatic. Right?
Are these effects long-term or short-term, and are there more, is there a whole line of effects that kids can experience on a long and a short term? And what are they?
I think basically when a child goes through such kind of trauma, they will be affected with their schoolwork. You know, such kind of children can also get to be very aggressive, you know, get into the fighting mode all the time. They will be generally very unhappy. They can go through depression as well, you know. So I think the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think younger children are more likely to be affected because they cannot hide, they cannot go away. So there is it impairs with their mental and emotional growth, which and a very important development stage. So there is a specific impact of the experience. And if they grow up, children who are exposed to domestic violence continues to face a range of other problems, school problems, work problems, limited sexual skills, depression, anxiety and other psychological phenomena. And then if they grow older, they have greater risk for substance abuse, drugs, alcohol, teenage pregnancies, delinquency, behavior, right? So that is, everything of this has been explored in reports by UNICEF, by WHO's organizations. So there's a lot of knowledge about the impact of violence. I think what is specific, and I'd like to show you another table, if I can deal with it.
Sure.
Is
just so we have some evidence to show what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, this is a type of violence by age group under young people, and you see you have this child bullying, youth violence. Then if you're if a teenager, you have already partner relations, then you have a sexual violence, and can be all the range through emotional as well. And the thing is, this setting is not just focused on women, or right? There are also boys in these settings, and this is a setting which creates the source for new violence and domestic violence at the later stage, right? For a child, if you see your most beloved people being attacked or offended by your other most loved person, right? It's just overwhelming you, and then you separate from your feelings. You can't separate from your feelings. You can disassociate from your feelings. It brings you in a situation. If this happens in all age periods, you have this permanent experience of not normal growing up. So you can't bond properly. You can't enter proper relations. You cannot be a proper parent. So this experience affects your life and the next generations deeply. So this is the long term, right? So if you talk short term, it's what happens today in the house, and is it an offense or not? It's criminalized, but this is societal, right? This is long term behavior, and that's why it is so. That's why we can talk it's endemic or pandemic, because it enters, right? And I've experienced my context I've been in, of course, where you have a lot of external violence as well, which is also traumatizing. This is carried into the household. You cannot be stressed permanently outside the household because of poverty or not being able to nourish your family, or not if the environment is not stable. It affects the family, and it affects everybody in the family. Right?
Thank you very much. This is a very interesting chat. I hope our viewers out there are actually taking notes and taking maybe screenshots if need be. And just right there where we were on the children, we've already talked about children and men in some way, and women in some way. So here is my question about men. In most cases, they're the perpetrators. But my question is, do they ever experience domestic violence, and in which ways? And do they open up to this? If they do, where do they go? And if they don't open up, why do you think don't they open up? Those are three questions in one.
Obviously, men are also facing such kind of violence. There are also women who abuse their husbands, literally beating them up or saying incorrect words to them. That's already abuse. So obviously there are organizations that are out there that are also helping such kind of men.
Okay. Anything to add on that, Peter?
Yeah, I think the main issue is important because there's a lot that has been done. As we talked about protection first, and I think protection is really key, so that trauma can stop. The other thing is, as we mentioned on the long term, is what is the cause of this violence? And there men are equally affected, so you cannot just protect women and have legislations, which I appreciate a lot, because I think the protections agenda is key, right? It is super important, and to have a legislation that is protecting people from violence. On the other side, those causing violence, if they're just basically criminalized, because they're offending, I think there needs to be a lot of, as you mentioned, programs that address men and that get men, right? And there we have a lot more stigmatas related to masculinity, manhood, everything. So there is a lot of requirements for gender role transformation, for understanding behavior, putting it in a different perspective. And there we have very different backgrounds, right? I can show you another graph, if I may. I don't know.
Yes, sure, you can. It's very important that people actually know what is happening and why.
2014's on mental health services for victims of violence. First, you have to, it has to be understood, this is a mental health issue, right? There is health, violence and mental health is linked. And then, as you said, there is counseling services. First, men have to understand this is a problem, right? And women as well. And then they have to address it, and they have to know how to address it, and with whom to address it. And if you see, this is maybe the proportion of services in 5 years back, but or 7 years back. But key is there, behind this is a perception of the importance of violence and then the importance of impact. And while they did this study, they asked the Bangladeshi woman about this situation, about her, whether she has experienced violence, and she said, "This is the first time I consider it. I thought it is normal." Right? So she was in a setting where violence against women and children was daily business, normal. So she didn't even consider needing advice and help. So it's the first step of empowerment is to address it as we do here, and to say this is not normal. This is not something that has to be, that is not given, right? We have to address it, we have to engage. You and me, in our family setting, we're suffering, all of us, right? For different reasons. And that's where the migration issue comes in, right? You come from a different setting with a different cultural setting into another setting. And on the way from there to here, you may have experienced a lot of violence as well already. And then you bring in your family, or the family comes here together in a new setting, and you have this common history of violence or different experiences, and then you have to find each other and you have to readdress it in this family setting. And this has to be addressed for the woman as well as for the man. And often men are not so much considered how it impacts on their situation. That's why I think to address the topics without the man, you miss a very, very important part of it, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
And if you put them, if it's just about criminalizing them, if you're in a migrant setting, you're not sure how does it affect the family in general. Is he sent back? Does he lose his visa, his status, right? What happens? So can I use these services? What will happen to him? What will happen to the family? What will happen will we be thrown apart as a family? So there's a lot of questions which needs to be answered, needs to be addressed and sensitized. Right?
Okay, so men actually experience domestic violence, and it's difficult for them to open up because they are not given a chance. Because every time everyone is empowering someone, they are either empowering girls or children, and I think it's.
I think most of them are just ashamed to come up and speak. You know.
Here in Switzerland, we've talked about kids, how a parent can protect their kid from, or they can walk their kid through domestic violence. How does the authorities ensure that they are actually informed when a child is going through domestic violence? Are there ways in schools that kids are supposed, or is there an easy communication between kids and teachers, or in the streets, or at the police? Some kids are young, they can't go to the police. Which one is the easiest way for the kids to get help in case of domestic violence?
Most of the times they notice that from school setup, you know. Usually when a child is having some funny behavior, sad, withdrawn, then the teachers will step in and start asking questions and contact their parents and look for solutions from there.
Peter, do you have something?
Yeah, well, there is, you asked specifically what the kid can do, right?
Yes.
There's a couple of helplines. The problem for a kid is that if it calls a helpline, it does not know what's going to happen. right? A child does not necessarily want to offend his parents,
That's true.
right? So you need to communicate that this is a protective, that there's a protection also, right? So
Yeah.
this is the difficulty to address helplines and services, is because people not so sure how is it affecting the setting they're in, or the family, or is it even worse afterwards, right? Or is somebody put in prison, or so there's a lot of skills, but I mean, recognizing it, the school systems, they have systems, right? They have
In school, there's an office
hotlines,
where-
there's an Ombudsstelle, whatever, right? So teachers take care of, they address it, they may have their family discussions, they can address it with the head teacher, they can have psychological support. So the school setting is quite okay for children.
Okay.
However, for a school to address the domestic situation is a different topic.
Yeah, that's a different
And
topic.
that's what I mentioned in the beginning, right? If you have a child, and then you cannot, and you take it out of his family setting, there is this risk of what's going to happen with the family. So children are very, very prudent, or so there's not a lot of knowledge required for assistance. And we've heard it in the video, and I think it's very important that Switzerland has ratified the Istanbul Convention, and now by the 1st of January this year we have a new legislations related to domestic violence, which is addressing all sorts of violence, more or less the ones I mentioned in the beginning, from stalking to sexual violence to child abuse, all kind of things. But the problem is, it's on one side, it's a legislation which helps to protect, but it also requires a behavioral change, understanding of norms, understanding of behaviors, right? And that's much more complex.
Okay.
And that needs to follow.
Okay, so apart from what she said, that a teacher sees a kid who's maybe down in his behaviors and asks, is there like, my question, like, is there like an office at school whereby if a child sees something at home, maybe parents throwing things at each other, where they can go and tell their teacher? Is there something like this in Switzerland?
Yeah, but my youngest daughter is 13. In school, she has somebody she can go if something happens. In school, in a school setting, bullying, whatever. Of course, she could go there if something happens in the family. Whether she would do that is another question, right?
Normally they have mentors in school.
Yes.
School where my children go to, they have mentors that they go talk to. If they are in any difficult situation, they tackle the problem.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. So this means actually kids have access to first-hand help in case they are going through domestic violence. Thank you so much, Winnie. We've seen already that in most cases domestic violence is between women and men. Why do you think these people always go back to their abusers?
I mean, you can only go back to the abuser when you don't have the way out, or when you're financially down, or you don't know what next to do with your life. That means you're not independent in some way, so you definitely you'll end up going back.
Okay, Peter, do you have something to add on?
No, maybe I would be interested. What is the experiences, the stories you hear from women? How do you
Why do
respond?
they end up going back?
Right?
Yeah,
Or do they go back? You said always, right? I'm not sure whether it's always, but it's very often, right?
I think
And,
it's sometimes, maybe. Is it like sometimes they go back or always go back?
In most cases, the stories that we hear from the projects that I've been working on, most of the women are not financially independent. So that's already a hurdle. That's already a stumbling block for most of them, because they don't have, they're trying to do some small businesses, but they cannot feed a whole household.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that one of the experience of here of this.
Just 1 minute. Sorry, 1 moment. I think we have a caller on the line. Hello there.
Hello.
Yes, please.
My name is Philip.
Yes, Philip. Where are you calling us from, Philip?
I'm calling you guys from Geneva.
From Geneva. What's your question, sir?
My question goes to the white man, Mr. Peter.
Peter.
He's Peter, yes.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you all for what you're doing.
Yes, please.
Myself and my family, we were watching it. It is very, very good information you guys are passing to us here in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And, but my question is that the issue of domestic violence.
Yes, please.
Is it true that sometimes when you report to the police, and if you are a migrant, and your partner is a Swiss woman or Swiss man, that they are more in the side of their own children rather than looking at the situation, because they seem to punish migrants more than the Swiss. And then they just tell us statistics of migrants who are committing domestic violence and Swiss who are committing domestic violence, but the punishment is more for the migrant. So sometimes it's like this Office of Domestic Violence is set up just to punish migrants. But this is my question. I would like him to answer, since I think he's a Swiss man, and I'd like to know what is his opinion in regards to this. And if I'm not satisfied with the way I'm being treated, is there any office I can complain to? And how can I go about this? But first, I'd like to thank you, Lady Promise, and that woman wearing blue. You people, you are doing a very, very, very good job. And,
Thank you.
We are very happy. We are watching. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Philip from Geneva. Did you get the question?
I guess I got the question. The question is whether migrants are more, whether legislation is not equal for migrants.
I think also his question is about fairness or equality, because he said...
Yeah, well, I think my response would be in the way that the Swiss legislation has, as we said, we just has adopted the law. So it is the focus is very much on protection. And the focus is very much on protecting families. And if something happens in the families, you look at the weakest point first, which is the children. The second is the women, if the offender is a man, right? And the third is the man. That puts you last in line, according to the legislation. That doesn't mean it's not important, as I mentioned, right? So it is very important, of course, that the man is addressed as well. But from a protection perspective, he's last in line. That's in the short term. That's in the very immediate term. And then, of course, there you have a problem. You mentioned migrants. As we said, depending to your background, you might think this is not yet an offense, while in Switzerland it already is an offense, right? Yeah. So according to your background, when I was visiting Kenya, the stick was something used in school, and the Teachers Association just approved sticks again in schools. But that's because they have 80 children or whatever, right? They're reasoning, but this is not done here. So all sort of violence, that's why I mentioned it in the beginning, all sorts of violence is prohibited in Switzerland. Okay. So that puts you in a very, if you're a migrant and you're not aware of that, of course you're maybe easier affected because your behavior is not adjusted to the settings you're in. Okay. And I think that's key. So the second is, I think it's not about complaining, it's about seeking advice, right? What is my role as a man in Switzerland? It's different than in your settings where I come from. You have different expectations. They're not necessarily easier, and they're also not easy for the others in the household. And so I think it's a family issue, and the first thing would be to discuss it jointly in the family, and if you can't, seek advice, also as a man, equally as a woman. Don't leave it to the woman, right?
I think Philip's concern or question was actually out of the house. It was about the authorities. I think he's trying to ask, where can I go if I've gone to the authorities, I am the victim, but I'm treated otherwise as an immigrant, because normally we see many situations like right now what's happening in the USA. You find that immigrants are treated differently in most countries. I think his concern is, what do I do as an immigrant who's a victim, but I've taken my abusive husband to the police and they're actually on his side? What what do you have to say in your profession? Maybe this is something that can be talked about out of emotions, and it doesn't have a professional advice, but what would you say about this? I guess this is what he's trying to say.
Maybe you say something.
You want to say something about that? No? Everybody has no...
No, I don't really grab it, right? So if you're a man and you're in a house and you experience violence.
Let's say a Swiss woman violates an African man.
Yes,
in
so
a
you
home.
can equal. Well, it's the same system. There are no specific systems. Well, I've just become member and probably go in the board of an association called Being Father in Switzerland for migrant fathers, because their situation is really difficult, because they feel easily offended because of their style, even if it's not, right? Even if it's just because there is violence. So, and then, but of course, their experience is that a lot of the services are focused on the victim, and the victim normally is a woman. A lot of the services are run by women, and a lot of the services focus on the child and the mother first. So it is a bit more difficult for a man with a migration background to get counseling and advice, and I think he has to be aware of it. But it's there; the system is established for them. So, but of course, needs maybe more justifications or more support. Okay. But if the cause is there, he can seek advice.
Okay, I hope
Philip is happy.
I hope you're happy, Philip. If you're not, you can call again and let us know why you're not happy. So I would like to go into your personal profession or area where you actually work more in the trauma cases. The perpetrators of domestic violence, do they ever change and become better? And if they do, how long does it take, or what does it take for a perpetrator to change to become a better person? Or Winnie, you can...
Yes, Winnie, maybe.
I mean, he's the professional.
Yes, but you are a professional too.
You know, for me personally, I think for such a person to change, the person should be willing to start the process. Otherwise, they will still go back and repeat the offense. I mean, willing to go to look for that help, willing to go and say, today, you know, it's enough. I have to go through that counseling. I have to go through the process of, you know, being mentored by the professionals, you know. So that's my take.
Peter?
I think she's very right. You're very right, Winnie. And I don't know why it comes into my mind, but it's about non-smoking, right? If you want to stop smoking, you need to have a certain interest in it. Now, the roots of smoking and why you do it can be very complex. And it's very difficult to let go, right? But so it's not an easy way. And it's really have to look at things. But I think the first step, and that's why we sit here, is violence in a family setting and in a domestic setting is not normal. Right? And control over a woman or control or kids or abuse or sexual harassment or forced sexual intercourse or slapping, sticking is not normal. Yeah. It's not normal. Normal behavior is different. Normal behavior is love-based. Is an interaction of love between humans, is a relation of love and understanding. And if this situation is violent, there is something wrong. And there needs to be a willingness to address it. Even so, and that's maybe where we distinguish, even so your cultural settings and your history shows the same. Even so your parents have been beaten each other, or your parents have been abused, or in your society it is quite common or often done. Even then it is not normal, right? So a normal child, and there's a lot of research, what is a normal child growing up, what is a normal settings, in the sense a healthy setting, right? What is good for development of your existence, of your being, of your feelings, right? And being disconnected from your feelings by beating up somebody, you have a problem, right? And then that's the first step. And if you accept that problem, you can go the distance, right? Then you start walking, you make one step. It's the first step, and it can be a very long road, because a lot can come up, right, from your back and history. But seeking advice and saying, yes, I did the first step is a success. So
Okay.
just do that first step and say, this is not
Normal.
healthy.
Yeah.
I want to change that for the good of my children, on the long term of my children, and the good of my wife, because I love them. It's not that I should beat them. I have to change.
Okay, so on the side of the victims, do they ever get over their trauma, and how long does this take? I think, Winnie, you're more experienced in this one.
You know, that takes, to get over such kind of a trauma takes a very long time. And normally there's a trigger. Most of the times, if you look at the kind of why somebody's hurting that bad or is in such a traumatic state, you find that it's deeply rooted. Probably this is somebody who went through abuse as a child. I mean, now the person who is abusing the other person could have gone through abuse as a child, most of the times, or they have self-esteem issues, you know. That's also very, very, it's a complex that
So-
some people have self-esteem, you know, like, I really have to do this to make
So
me
it
happy.
has, it actually is a very difficult thing to get over. Is that what you're trying to say?
The willingness, and you can get over it, but then you have to surround yourself with positive people as well. You know, it's a process. You cannot just heal from today, tomorrow. No, it takes a longer
long
time.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Do you want to add on it?
Yes, I think it's well, I think, well, trauma research shows that you can live with trauma, right? Overcoming it, it's not gone, right? Some memories remain. The thing is, and you mentioned that, by the way, trigger. And trauma, I don't know if maybe I've seen the logo of the TAC is body, mind, and soul.
Yeah.
So trauma is in the body. Trauma is stored in the body.
Not in the mind.
It's in, yeah, like in the mind. So it's in the mind, it's in the body. And so you feel stiff, you feel something in the back. It develops further into diabetes or into whatever, right? So it's causing aggressions, it's
Pain
it's
as well.
pain. It is forcing you to abuse, to drugs, or, you know, for getting over it, for putting down the stress. So it's everywhere. So, but then, well, I've chosen hypnosis because it's a radical, quick way to address the subconsciousness and to go to the root cause and to address it there. Then it can go very quick.
Okay.
It can be very quick to let go that stress, right?
Thank
There's
you.
also body. There is you can do mindfulness, you can do yoga, you can do everything that getting out of the stress. But I think key importance is: do you address the root causes, or do you address symptoms, or do you learn to behave with the stress? A lot of therapists you just control your aggression, but
to
the
calm-
force
to calm
and
you
to
down.
calm,
Yeah.
which is very important for this protection, as we mentioned, right? To protect the family, you need to control. And I think even government can force you to control by putting you, in the future they will be able to put you into a program. Judge can put you in a program to control violence, right? Or aggression. But the root causes in a man or in an aggressor can be still fed, right? From his own memories, from his own abuse, from whatever, right? And this, to get this, and I mentioned disassociations, to re-understand that your feelings, to address your feelings, to get access to your feelings, to your emotions, and to the emotions of others, to feel empathy to others again, right? Can be a very hard process. It's a lot of it needs a lot of personal growth to be able to do it. That's why for children you have to take them out, because it's very difficult to feed them. But for a man, I think every man and every woman that is violent can go through a process and get rid of it.
To the women, are there some specific signs if someone is going through domestic violence?
Absolutely, there are signs that when somebody is going through domestic violence, they could be withdrawn. You could actually see the physical hurtings, you know, maybe black-eyed or something like that. This kind of women could also go to a very, very deep depression, you know, that really makes them lose hope
Okay.
and don't know what next.
Okay, and on the long-term effects of domestic violence towards women, what are they?
I mean, that
The
takes
long
really,
term.
it takes away your self-esteem as a person.
Yeah. Peter, can you add something on that?
Yeah, there's a very long list, right, which affects you. You can mentally, you can become depressive, anxiety, sleeplessness, everything imaginable related to anxiety, right?
And you can also get into mental health problems.
As we
also.
mentioned, you disassociate with the situations.
Yeah.
You lose take care of the household. You for example, you don't cook at lunch. You're worried. You whatever. You don't go shopping, and then you're beaten up because you didn't shop, and all these kind of things, right? And then so there's mental things. There's the physical thing. The mental stress can affect your body.
Okay.
You know, and then the third is, of course, as you said, is this more the spiritual level, right? At the soul level, you feel you lose your self-esteem. You have suicide thoughts. You don't understand why you're here. You feel helpless. You cannot change situations. You're not worth it. So a lot of this, the variety is large, right? And then on this you build a series of second symptoms. You go back, you go into violence, you go into scratching, itching yourself in order to feel yourself. So, there's a lot of symptoms that go a long way. And that is a very important, you forget. You simply forget. You try to get rid of all this and just to forget things. So it's not there, it doesn't exist, you deny. So denial is quite a strong response because it keeps you sane. But the denial is always there, and it always wants to have answers, right? And that's why addressing denial that's why I mentioned subconsciousness. The denial remains in the subconsciousness, and if you cannot harmonize this, you're always in trouble.
Okay. Just a quick reminder to our viewers, the numbers to call are going through your screen down there. You can call us in the studio, the line is open, and give us your question or your opinion. Thank you so much for staying with us, and we are continuing. My next question is about the immigrants. Do you think here in Switzerland domestic violence is a common problem for immigrant families? Would you rather start, or would you rather what would you say?
I think it affects many immigrants because lack of information. Sometimes the immigrants don't know where to get this sort of information or help from. So they could, that can really make someone angry, and they could start the fights at home because of lack of not knowing what to do.
Okay, Peter, do you think it's more of a problem to immigrant families here in Switzerland?
I think for immigrant families it's a greater challenge, right? Because of their the background they have, the cultural settings they're coming from. They have a lot of other questions if they come here. We mentioned that when you created this voice, right? There's a lot of things that that you have to learn and understand. So this is one, and then you do not know how these services function, and whether you can rely on them. So many come of a setting. I've just talking with a Chilean, right? That came from when you had of course, you came from a country where the government is against vast populations, right? Argentina, the dictatorships in Argentina or the fascist regime in Spain, this pops up, bro. This experience pops up, and you do not necessarily trust in these services. So you have to create trustful services. Normally it's your health doctor, right? So the first entry normally is your doctor, because you can, this is a healthcare person, and this is a healthcare issue, and you can address it to him. So for a victim, I think it's very useful, right? You can talk about it, you can seek advice, you can refer you further. But for a migrant also there's a language issue often, right? So you have this, can I talk about it? Do I talk about it?
Or how can I express myself?
How can I express myself? Yeah. And many, it makes you silent. These situations silence you.
Okay.
And why should I talk about it? Will it help me, or do I better keep calm? Right? Do I better be humble on it? So, but yes, I think it's good to address it, because it's your first step of empowerment.
So would you say that the authorities have not provided enough access to information for immigrant families? Is this why they stay quiet and suffer all through the way, and they don't say anything because they don't know, first of all, where to go, or are they even allowed to say it to anybody? Do you believe, or would you say that it's because they don't have enough information from the authorities?
I think it's always difficult if you're in a different context and you do not really know on whom to rely on. So it is more, and this is a very personal thing. I mean, Switzerland simply tries, it's not a personal thing, it's a societal thing, it's addressing everybody, it's a common concern. Just don't taboo it, address it. So that is, I think, information which can be spread better. That's why we do this here, use it, right? It's not, as I said, it's not healthy for none of the family, right?
So.
And there's more obstacles, and if you, of course, and it's a question of statuses. If your status is uncertain, this is already insecurity. Now addressing something which you try to hide is another insecurity. So I think the services need to provide security, safety and security for being addressed. Just to give the information is good, but it's not enough. So a migrant has probably more. I'm speculating, right? A migrant from another cultural context with another language and maybe another religions or whatever may have more obstacles to overcome to be trustful in the system, in the services provided in mental health, right? Even saying violence or being violent is a mental health issue is for many, in the concept of masculinity, quite an issue. Because media spreads I'm a hero if I can be an aggressor if I'm violent. Now suddenly I have a mental health problem, right? So you see, there's a lot to overcome. So it's how you address it, to whom you address it, but there's a lot of requirement to address it. I don't know the figures whether there's more migrants or Swiss affected, but there's many affected in Switzerland.
Okay, there is different communities here in Switzerland from different countries. Do you think it's the work of the government to put or to bring this information to these communities, or is there a way, can there be a bridge between the government and the communities whereby the community members or the leaders can easily go to the government, get this information and bring it to its people? I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Do you think it's the work of the community to look after their people, to make sure they have access to the information available? Or do you think the authorities should push it a little bit to the communities? What can you say there?
Sometimes we have to be proactive and look for the information ourselves. Talk to the right people, go out and look for the information,
and then take
instead
it to
of instead of waiting for the government to do things for us. It's our responsibility to step up and
I think there's a common understanding that migrants are more vulnerable as victims, and then as we mentioned, women and children are more vulnerable, so that is a special vulnerability. And I think there's a common understanding of that, and surely also in the health sector, right? And so I think the health system is organized not government and then population, but you have the counties, you have the communities, you have different levels that can provide services. So if you say authorities, yes, authorities will address it, and by ratifying this. By ratifying this Istanbul Convention, there will be more. There is more to come, and Switzerland is very active in it with commissions and gender equity. With this commission or a Fachstelle, I don't know. But so there's a lot going on. But I think it's not enough. And my Diaspora TV, for example, addressing it from a different way, saying, "Hey guys, look, this should not be. We can change that. This is a strength also, right? I mean, there's no reason why the migrant population should wait for solutions for a government to respond. Their experience often is their government never responded to their needs. Right? This is maybe also a bit tricky, right? But as you've seen, 15% in Africa have mental health services if you're a victim of these kind of things. So it's good to have self-help groups. It's good to create groups. It's good to create circles when you can talk with each other, because talking of trauma and talking about that is the first step, and it empowers you. And I've seen a very interesting small initiative. Somebody told me of the Ukraine, where they made an application on the handset where you could try, what do I do if I've experienced domestic violence? So when they did it, so they learned to do it, then they score like in a game, right? And then with this game, then when they really were aware of doing it, how to do it on this mobile app, they got a bracelet, a plastic, one of these many plastic bracelets. But then women started to have this. So they met each other in the streets and they say, oh, this woman has a bracelet. So they started to talk with each other, but not about but they started not to talk about what the problems they have, but they started to talk about solutions. How can I address this situation? What do I do? How do you do it if your man comes back home drunk and at night? And how do you behave? Solutions. Where do you go? What do you do? So enable people to think and talk about it. Just bring it out of this taboo zone. So that was that application was doing this. And I think there is much more to do. And if Diaspora TV can contribute to people start realizing the situation, start talking without fears, start addressing it, start finding solutions, specific solutions for their situations, help each other in their cultural settings, transform these settings for better, right? Including the caretakers or whatever, however you call him. I think there's a lot of potential. So I think that's why I'm really fascinated by this.
Her voice.
Her voice, because that is exactly this first step of empowering people.
That's interesting.
You have experienced this, right?
Yeah, sure.
People change, I think.
Sure, they change. And people just don't share traumatic stories, but they also share stories of success that do encourage other women.
Okay, thank you very much to our callers out there. Please feel free to call us and get involved in this discussion. It's interesting how much we don't know as people and how much we can get from you guys. So we've been talking about kids and men and women, and I would like to turn a little bit the discussion around. We're all living in a world where LGBTQ is part of us, is part of the community. So when it comes to domestic violence, does it also happen there in the LGBT community? Do they also experience domestic violence? Winnie?
I think they do.
Yeah?
I mean, any sort of abuse, any sort of aggression is already violence. So even among the LGBT community, it happens.
Peter, and how, if you can specify for us what kind of violence goes on there? Or
well, I don't have figures or experience on the issue, but I've seen when just the legislations in Kenya and Uganda change, against homosexuals. This is, of course, when the authorities do the opposite of protecting people, right? So there is this issue of, I think this is also a vulnerable group.
So here in Switzerland,
I don't have the figures, but due to their situation, I think they are more vulnerable than others.
okay.
That's what my guess is, right?
Okay.
And due to that, I think they need attention and protection on these issues.
Okay.
Whether it's true or not, I don't have the specifics.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge about Marak meeting? A Marak meeting?
No, not really.
Not.
Okay, we skip that. We skip that. So, what does the law here say about domestic violence?
Well, the law just changed. Let me show you, or is about to change. I mentioned this. Where is it now? It's gone. Up.
Yeah, there it is.
Sorry, I have to put slideshow.
Just so we are sure about how to tackle domestic violence in our homes, how to deal with it, we have to know what the law says. So I think this is where The screen comes in. Okay, there it is again.
Maybe we should not stop.
Okay.
Well, I mentioned this Istanbul Convention. And it's interesting because Switzerland ratified, I don't know what happens, okay, it ratifies them in 18, and it is now the legislation, Verordnung it's called, is in place since January 1st, so very recent. And what I had on the other side was a list of, this list of what falls under violence. And we have heard in the video that all sort of violence is under these new legislations is an offense. So basically all sorts of violence are treated, and which means, from if you look at it from the other perspective, you're protected from all sorts of violence. That's the law.
Okay.
But still you're in a family setting, and as I mentioned, still you have to decide. Maybe you need a technician quickly? Or?
No, it's okay. Just continue.
So now, of course, the law is established. Now you need to establish the services as well, and you have to increase the helplines and the services and all sorts of things which we mentioned. I think that there is room for a lot of things still to do. And I mean, the government can give the frame, but then it has to be filled, and I think civil society organizations and self-help groups have a lot of space and room and importance. And nobody don't wait, right? And as you said, you started the initiative last year, and you told me you have 90 staff already acting on it in Kenya, and even here you started this, so there's...
I appealed for an end to violence everywhere now. But violence is not confined to the battlefield. For many women and girls, the threat looms largest where they should be safest, in their own homes. And so I make a new appeal today for peace at home and in homes around the world. We know lockdowns and quarantines are essential to suppressing COVID-19, but they can trap women with abusive partners. Over the past weeks, as economic and social pressures and fear have grown, we have seen a horrifying global surge in domestic violence. In some countries, the number of women calling support services has doubled. Meanwhile, healthcare providers and police are overwhelmed and understaffed. Local support groups are paralyzed or short of funds. Some domestic violence shelters are closed, others are full. I urge all governments to make the prevention and redress of violence against women a key part of their national response plans for COVID-19. That means increasing investment in online services and civil society organizations, making sure judicial systems continue to prosecute abusers, setting up emergency warning systems in pharmacies and groceries, declaring shelters as essential services, and creating safe ways for women to seek support without alerting their abusers. Women's rights and freedoms are essential to strong, resilient societies. Together we can and must prevent violence everywhere, from war zones to people's homes, as we work to beat COVID-19.
Thank you so much. That was the United Nations telling us about the law, what it says about domestic violence.
Well, Guterres, he addresses that is the COVID response, right? Because, and I think what that...
Yeah, actually that was my next question to you, and I wanted him to first tell us, to first hear from the United Nations, then we can go ahead into our next question, which is about the situation of COVID-19 right now. We understand, or we've read on the internet, that in so many countries there has been a high rise of domestic violence cases. He said already, he talked about the measures that the Swiss government has put out. What can you add on that, and how would you advise our society right now in this time?
No, I think Guterres, he addressed strategies government should do, right? Putting more shelters, having support systems, do having helplines, you know, changing, maybe adapt the law specifically for this period. So there's a lot of
sorry, it's technical stuff.
Where is it? Here. Expansion of helplines, information sharing, funding shelters, expansion of access to service for survivors, limiting risk factors associated to violence. So this is the issue of letting out prisoners, or control the modification of family law during the period, so you can have online requests to the government. So there's different services the government can do during a pandemic. But I think Switzerland, Switzerland responded quite well, because they said we do not make a complete lockdown. And one of the reasons even mentioned by the government was domestic violence. Let's put it back on the...
Yeah, you should change it back. That's true.
So one of the reasons not to have a full lockdown was the issue of domestic violence, and I think it was seen in many countries that have made a lockdown, a severe lockdown, that the numbers for helplines doubled, and so there is more domestic violence, because you cannot avoid being in this situation. And I also got people telling me that as I mentioned before, settings like in Bosnia or others where you have experienced a war situation or a crisis situation or poverty is high, right? Then you have a lot of stress. So you have a pandemic, but basically there is already many problems, and then as we mentioned here, I mean, violence against women is also pandemic, right? So you're in a pandemic, fight the pandemic. So it's difficult, but I think the more you make people stuck in a setting, the more difficult it is for them to respond.
Winnie, have you got some cases so far in this time, or do you have some talks already with some women who are facing domestic violence at the moment?
Currently, no. Currently, everybody is just on their own.
I've had cases of girls who were married to European men, and in the course, the men become abusive, sexually, verbally, everything. Like, they become so aggressive to them, and actually they're very intimidative. They're telling them, you can't open your mouth because I will make sure you get deported or thrown into jail. There is a lot of immigrant girls like this, and they don't know what to do. There is one that actually came to me in person, but I didn't know what to do for her. I would like you, as a Swiss man, to tell us something about this situation, what you think these kinds of girls can do.
Well, I think first, it's not what the man said is not true. Every woman is protected here by law. And as we said, by these legislations, it is including all forms of violence: sexual, physical, control, behavioral control, mental violence. So a woman does not have to accept the situations, and if she's threatened, she has to seek advice. She has to seek advice, and she will find advice, right? So it may be difficult for her to do it. As I said, you know, the issue of recurrence is, of course, always something, right? How will he find out? He's already controlling me. Will he look in my emails? He will see the money, whatever. So
just one second. Yeah. Let's pick a caller. I'm sorry, okay, we start from there. We have a caller. Hello. What is your name and where are you calling us from, please?
My name is Johannes Burhane, and I'm calling you from Bern.
Hi, Johannes.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. What's your question?
My question is to Peter.
Yeah.
Because he was talking about global, and my question is especially how is in Canton Bern, because when we are living in Bern, so what did he know about violence, and is there any organization also to help? There is one organization which I know, but how about for the migrant diaspora or migrant background, if they have any place to go to comply about their problems, and if he can specifically tell us about his experience in Canton Bern.
Thank you so much, Johannes. He will
You're
answer
welcome.
you
Okay,
shortly.
thank you very much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
bye,
Bye.
bye,
Have a
bye.
nice day.
Well, I think I don't know whether the question was specifically addressing men. So for men in the county of Bern, you have
As immigrant man.
as immigrant man.
Yeah.
So first man, right?
Yeah.
As a man, you have about 3 services: one in Bern, one in Zurich, one in Basel, where you can address it. And so run by men for men. And there is and additionally there is this prevention of violence places where you can address it. There's other helplines, and in Bern specifically there is 2 organizations, one in general and one is for migrant men, as I mentioned already before, Vatersein in der Schweiz, and this is also beyond that is Männer CH, so the men movements behind, and I think they're not only addressing men as a victim, but also men as in this situation of cultural change and behavioral change. So I'll be part of that association, okay. And I think this is a way forward, right? Because you have also to understand, men have to understand other men's situation, and very often it's very difficult for them to address it because they don't want to show weakness, they don't want to talk about their violence, of course not. Why should you know? It's not easy to talk. I mean, you don't have this acceptance if you're a perpetrator.
Yeah.
If you're a woman, or if you're a victim, you always have say the bonus of being the victim, not as a bonus in the sense of what happened to you, but you're listened to. And as a perpetrator, it's much more difficult to address things and to be honest about things. So these organizations, men self-help groups, or men issues, or these organizations, Vatersein in der Schweiz, is addressing men to talk with men first.
Okay.
Not just going to the jurisdiction side, right? But
Okay.
addressing it, and I think that is always a very good first step. And maybe it is the icebreaker in order to you to say, hey, yes, hey guys, I really have a problem, or I have a problem.
Do you have like a website that we can leave the people, like Johannes? He
Yeah,
for
ask
sure.
him. He might have one. Yeah.
Okay, we will leave you with the information, Johannes, where you can go if you are an immigrant man or woman. I don't know. This is just about men.
No,
And-
and so Johannes, I know him. He's part of that network, so he has answers as well.
Okay, I have
So-
another caller. Please, hello. Where are you calling from, and what's your name, please?
I'm calling from Bern. I'm Moses Peres. I'm a musician here in Bern, in Switzerland.
Okay, Moses. What's your question, please?
My question was, what is the first remedy you have to take into as an immigrant here in Switzerland?
What is the remedy you can...
Yeah, the first, as immigrants living together here in Switzerland, that you don't find yourself being into this domestic violence code of 18.
Thank you very much, Moses. He's asking, what could be the first step as immigrants or a couple immigrant as they come into Switzerland? What would be the first step for them to take so that they avoid themselves from getting into domestic violence stage? Is that true, Moses?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, thank you so much.
Your experience?
Let them answer you, please.
Well, the first step is always to get the right information.
Where do they get this right information?
Well,
I
Could it
think
be
we
from
put
the
it on the. We
police,
can.
or could it be
Just
from
for a
the
TV, can
internet?
put it on the. Can put. This
Okay, you will see.
But let me also.
So Moses.
That was first. Just wait. First is this. First is get the right information.
Yeah.
Then.
And the information you can find it on www.opferhilfe-schweiz.ch. Moses, if you can hear me, that's where you go as soon as you come to Switzerland and you plan to have a life here with your partner without having domestic violence issues. You'll get all the information there, and Peter is adding on that.
Yeah, I think first for me is talk.
to your
talk with
each other,
right?
Communication.
Communicate. There is a
Yeah.
problem, right? There is a problem. No, I mean, when in this Vaterstein in der Schweiz, with what Johannes mentioned, there's a lot of the discussions was male came to Switzerland or youth come to Switzerland first, and the family comes, and on this passage they had so much traumas and bad experience, violence experience. And then suddenly this family has maybe not been together for months, for years, whatever, right? And then you suddenly together in a setting here, and you have all this baggage and all this history, and you don't know how to solve it. And meanwhile you start drinking, then the other one thinks, hey, why are you drinking? It's not good. So you start having conflicts. So if you see these conflicts coming up, be aware there are root causes for this. Don't just offend each other. Start talking. Try to address it properly, and then say, look, you need advice, you need help. Try to get out, get some help, get some counseling. And I think one address, as I mentioned, is your doctor. You know, and he can refer you further, or one can be a friend or an institution that brings you, as we mentioned, yes, you have links to bring you further, but just don't cover up, right?
Okay.
And there are also so many self-help groups that people can join to find also from word of mouth such kind of information.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. We will try to wind up now because we're running short of time. Just so I know, I'm a neighbor or a family member, and my sister is having domestic violence issues at home. I would like to help her, but I'm scared to get involved with the partner. What would you suggest would be the best way for me to help this person, my neighbor or my family member here in Switzerland, and they're going through domestic violence? How can I help her or him?
Counseling.
Me, I should counsel them?
No, send them to a counseling professional who can help. Yeah.
Some partners have a tendency of blaming me for, like me as the helper, the third party, as the perpetrator. They tend to turn the blame on me, and this could also be very bad for me.
But that's a professional way of helping, because now this person, the victim, is going to get the right information, and they will actually give them protection.
Okay.
I would go for professional help.
Okay.
Yeah.
In general, Peter, how do we stop domestic violence?
I think Winnie is right. I mean, it can be very overwhelming for you as a sister, right, or something. But I think it also needs commitment. It needs this commitment, and I think it is a step of empowerment. Of empowerment of your sister to go for counseling, maybe, and it would be even better if you could say you're concerned, right? Talk about your concern. Go from an emotional level, go from a love level. I love you both, right? I'm suffering because I see what happens here. Can I support you? Can you address it, right? So
okay, like on a global basis.
On a global level.
Sorry, thank you for correcting me. On a global level. Winnie, you can give us...
sorry, I didn't get your question.
On a global level, how can we stop domestic violence?
On a global level?
Yeah.
I mean, even on a global level, you have to...
Okay, first finish what you're saying.
For example, the women we work with, it zeroes to one thing. They have to go for that professional counseling. Whether it's on a community level or on a global level, there must be a professional out there who can help them tackle or walk them through this journey.
Have you ever gotten in contact with a woman who was brutalized by their partner, and then they told you it was okay because of their culture? Does this happen, and how do you advise these people?
Yes, it has happened. I've heard such kind of stories, and many of them actually. But the only first step that we do is to listen to their stories, and we don't judge them. We don't judge these women. We give them to the professionals who help them and tell them to walk away if the abuse continues, instead of staying into this abusive relationship.
Okay, as we wind up, I would like both of you to give a last word to our viewers. Peter, you can go first. Something you would like people to know or to do better, or just something from you as a professional.
Yeah, as a professional, I think that's my organization's goal, is just to reduce, transform violence, just to reduce it, right, in the long term, which means don't accept it. I think that's the first step, don't accept violence. And then the steps is, as we mentioned, protect yourself first. You know, you have to be in a setting which is not recurring. And if this setting continues, you have involved the setting, involve the change, right? To go for, and in the long term, it is, as you mentioned, it is a behavioral change. But don't think it's, and my experience just is, don't think it's too easy, because every violator or every perpetrator has also a history. So my final word is address it in a holistic way.
Just 1 second, I have a call on the line. Okay. I think he should be, or she should be, our last one. Please tell us where you're calling from and what's your name.
Hello, my name is Sanchez.
Hi Sanchez, thanks for calling. What's your question, please?
I'm calling from Luzerne.
Yes, please, Sanchez.
The question is about domestic sexual abuse.
Domestic sexual abuse.
Yes, exactly at this time point whereby when the COVID is taking place and the lockdowns are there, and you have a lot of women or your woman who actually takes more time that you have to have the sexual contact, and you don't have, you have enough of that, and it keeps getting worse, and the violence takes place because you cannot do it every day. And now when it involves that, it begins to get worse, and she can actually set up an abuse on this issue. What happens after?
Okay, I don't know if, did you get his question?
I understood the story, but I don't. What happens to whom? To the abused, or to the abuser, or to both?
What happens? Your question is what happens to the abuser or to the victim?
Maybe it's not so important. Well, first the relation is destroyed.
Since the COVID lockdown has taken place, most women are taking advantage of their husbands sexually, and this decides to involve and blend in the violence, whereby the woman could actually attack a man for this kind of case and threatens him. So how does this help up in the men? What advice can you give to the men?
If a woman is not ready to have sex with you, I'm trying to get this. If the man is not ready to have sexual intercourse with the wife, with the woman.
Let me try to answer. Keep on the line so we can. Well, first I think every intercourse that is not agreed upon by both sides is humiliating and an offense. Is violating. By the new law, it's a violation. But even on a moral basis, right, it's humiliating the other. So the first thing is speak about that. Speak about this is humiliating, right? And establish your self-esteem on that.
So
whether you're a man or a woman, right? And then if the other one does not agree in these discussions or does not communicate with you on that, seek assistance.
Is this an offense that you can report?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That's an offense. That's a reason why they have to start talking to somebody they trust, because already the whole thing is humiliating.
Okay.
You know. So after that, then go for the professional help.
Okay. Well, I think. Okay, thank you, Winnie. I think that was our last caller, and
maybe is he still on the line?
Moses.
Still on the line, but the question.
I'm not sure whether we understand.
Can you please be a bit clear on your question, because it's
or did we answer it?
Did we answer it at all?
It was answered, but there is just one point about it.
Yeah.
You see, if a man forces a woman on sexual, and it's his wife, he wants sex, and his wife is not actually in that kind of mood that you have sex 3 to 4 times in a day,
Yeah.
It could lead to a chaos.
Yes.
What happens to the men right now? Because when the lockdown hits down, all men are at home and with their families. And if a wife tries to profit this out of the man,
take advantage.
And if the man cannot give it, then it starts creating chaotic and maybe threatens later when the two do not agree upon something. So how does this help that it can prevent this problem? Because also men get harassed violently, domestically through these issues. And maybe men do not want to respond back and say, oh, this is a problem. But this is a problem that is affecting a lot of men since the COVID took place. So that was just my question. Halfly it has been answered, but I'm sure we could get more information, and this can assist a lot of men who I am speaking on behalf of.
Thank you so much, Moses. I think he's trying now to ask on behalf of a man who's who has no interest to have maybe too much sexual intercourse in a day or in a week or in a month, and the wife is more active, but he doesn't want this.
But the man should communicate to the
and the woman becomes aggressive.
Well, it's the same situation. I mean, it's the services and the law is for both. It's gender equal. So it's gender as a man, it's domestic violence, but you can also say it's violence against a partner, or it's gender violence. So the law is the same, and the man is as protected as the woman.
Tell me, how does a man go to the police and says, my wife is assaulting me because I can't have sex with her? The first answer was legal. Yeah.
It's the same.
Okay.
The second level is, of course, moral or culturally based.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with masculinity and being the strong side, right? And then, of course, it's humiliating at home, and it may be humiliating if you address it to a public service, right? So, the humiliation is double or triple, and then you're not believed, and you're laughing, right? But if it's serious, it's very humiliating. It's not the majority. The majority, as we mentioned, I mean, the large majority is women and children, but there is a group of men that is affected. And for them, it's more difficult.
Okay.
And for them, the situation is the same. First talk, as you would do the other way, right?
Yeah, it's just sit down with
seek professional advice.
Yeah. First of all, sit down with your partner or your spouse and talk about it. Communicate. Be open about it. Tell them, look, this and this is rubbing me the wrong way. I don't like this.
Okay, we need to close now. I think we've taken actually more time than what we were supposed to take. He had concluded, I think, and would you say something, your last words to our viewers?
Oh, generally, I think there's a lot of violence going on across the globe right now. And my take is that if we could just be kind and polite to each other and love each other more, then we could make this world a better place.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to thank our viewers and our callers, those of you who have been part of this show. Thank you so much for staying with us. Thank you for joining me here. I want to thank my technical team, which is behind the scenes. Thank you so much, guys. You're doing a great job. And I would like also to thank the Federal Office of Equality. I'd like to thank Rudolf and Ursula Streit Stiftung. Thank you so much for all of you that have been with us all the way. We will see you next time. This is Diaspora TV Switzerland. Bye.